I think there's a lot of product marketers who want to be the star of the show, but the star of the show is everybody winning. And so, like, pitching in where you're asked to is important. But it's also important to have boundaries. So you need to draw that line for yourself.
Welcome back to the B2B Playbook, where we believe that great go-to-market is about people, not platforms. Few people have done more to make product marketing practical for small B2B teams than Kayla Medica. Through her Medica newsletter, her book, The Medica Method, and her hands-on pricing masterclass, Kayla has helped founders and marketers connect product, marketing, and sales around one story that actually sells. Her frameworks make product marketing accessible to lean teams that can't afford specialists but know that they need that alignment. Her recent work bridges that gap between theory and action, showing that price isn't just a number, it's a message. And in a time when B2B teams are under pressure to prove value, Kayla's approach to pricing, positioning, and storytelling is an absolute masterclass in how small teams can punch above their weight. So today we are thrilled to be joined by Kayla to talk about how modern B2B teams can make product marketing work for them. Kayla, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's always quite the experience having someone introduce you and summarize everything you do.
I love it. I always like to think of trying to do an intro that someone would be proud to share, like their partner or their parents, and be like, because I feel like no one really understands what we do. And you're like, here's a
Yeah.
summary. This person thinks I'm really, really cool. Listen to this.
I always dread people asking me, like, oh, so what do you do? And it's like, oh, God, where do I start? I don't even know.
Yes, my parents still have absolutely no idea. My wife, Geordie, at least she held sales and CS roles. So she gets it, which is kind of therapeutic, I have to say. Kayla, I want to kick right into it. Product marketing. A lot of smaller B2B teams, they probably don't have a dedicated product marketer in-house, and they often have a generalist that is trying to do absolutely everything. Now, what breaks when no one is doing product marketing, even within a small team?
Yeah. So someone inevitably is doing product marketing, but it might not be one person. So your founder might be doing your positioning, your marketer will be doing some of it. Maybe your salespeople are doing some of it where it's more related to the pitch and that kind of thing. So it's happening, but when it's not orchestrated by effort, like someone intentionally saying, we're going to do product marketing, we're going to do it this way, and we're going to follow this process, what ends up breaking down is that things just never stick. So if you're in a team that's like constantly doing elevator pitches and trying to refine, like, what are we and what do we do and how do we tell that story, that's generally where product marketing can really help, because there's a real overlap in what is produced from a brand and a product perspective. So you'll have your brand guidelines and your brand messaging, but you need to have your product guidelines and your product messaging. And they will look very similar, hopefully, if you've aligned them properly, but they are still distinct. And so if you've only got one of those, that's where the consistency between teams breaks down. So what someone sees in an ad might differ slightly to what they get in the sales pitch, and then that differs a little bit to what they get in the customer experience. And once you've extrapolated that, it just becomes this breakdown of expectations where people started at point A, and by the time they've gotten to point B, the distance is noticeable.
So it helps bring like more of a cohesive narrative to your product, right? And how you communicate that to the market. For those who aren't super across what product marketing really is, have you got something for us there? Things
Yeah.
sweet spot is?
Yeah, so I like to break it down as, like, take away the ing off of product marketing. You've got product and market. So your product marketer is not necessarily a marketer. They could be a product person, they could be a CS person or anyone else. Where basically their job is to think about how does the product and the market relate. So depending on what life cycle stage your product is at, like if it doesn't exist yet and you're doing market research, what they're going to be doing is very different to someone who is working on an established product and it's a land and expand strategy, or it's a new feature release or something like that. So basically, your product marketer is your buddy system for your product and will travel with the product throughout its life cycle from research all the way through to sunsetting if you ever do shut it down.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. And fortunately for our listeners, you have written a book on this as well around product marketing.
Yes.
And I love process. And I see like you've kind of broken it down. Is it a 12-week process with the Medica Method, Kayla? Is that what you've done?
Yeah. So the book started out as like once I became a fractional product marketer, I was just writing a process for myself to follow with all my clients. And it was literally like an onboarding checklist to make sure that I wasn't forgetting things. And then it just got bigger and bigger. I started filling it in with like, well, if this happens, then do this, and sort of decision making guidelines. And then I realized it'd be really helpful to share that with other people. And yeah, I chose a 12-week sort of timeline for it. So the idea is that if you don't have product marketing, or you have product marketing but it's not working and you need to redo your foundations or set them for the first time, it's a 12-week timeline that factors in you've still got a day job. So this is not Monday to Friday 9 to 5 doing this process. It's like week 1 is literally like book in meetings, like, you know, it's very achievable on top of whatever existing workload you have, because there is absolutely no way that someone with a product marketing title could tell their boss, hey, I'm going to do this thing for 12 weeks and you're not going to see any work from me in that time. So it's broken down into very small steps.
Yeah, you need to do it in the background, right? It's the
Yeah.
culmination of all those steps is really what leadership start to see. And it's so helpful to have a process to follow. And I love that it has come from your own firsthand experience and like essentially creating that checklist. Something similar happened for us with our demand gen program, really, because we released our own strategy as our 5Bs framework on the podcast, then people were asking us for like a faster way to implement it. That originally came from when we were working agency side and being like, what's all the stuff that people are missing that they're not doing internally to make us do a better job as like basically amplifiers of whatever's going on. And then people were asking for it. And that's how we built ours into our own 12-week system as well. And so I love that it's come from like your own personal experience and like what you would want to do, because I think it makes it super grounded in something that's very actionable, but also very digestible too. Because the reality is it can't take more than a couple of hours a week, because especially in small teams, right? The B2B marketer cannot afford to put everything on pause and be like, hold on, guys. I'm just working through the Medica
I'm going to
Method
do
and
this
I'm on
ideal
chapter
thing.
3. Just hold off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely actually one of the first things that the book says is like, it's not very long, it's like 120 pages. But one of the first things it says is like, read the whole book through before you start doing stuff, because you need to know like what your end result is going to be in order to like work towards it, right? And like the most common feedback I've gotten from it is people start reading it with the intention of finishing it and they actually never finish it, because they start being like, oh, I could do that right now, and like they start implementing the work or they start doing the questions or whatever, and then they come back to me and be like, oh, that unlocked a bunch of all this other stuff and now I'm doing all that, and I'm like, oh my god, please just finish it. Just you don't have to do it, just finish reading it first.
I love it. That's
It's
great.
very frustrating.
That's the reality, though. I mean, look, it's great that it's giving them so many ideas, as they're working through it. But yeah, it's very helpful if people understand the whole thing on the first run and then they know how to execute it bit by bit. So who are sort of the key stakeholders that a product marketer needs to take along the journey?
Yeah, so your classic Venn diagram is marketing, product, customer support, sales. Sometimes customer support's not included in that. I would say the reason why is that just in like a chronology perspective, you need to get product marketing and sales, like they're more like your boss will be more happy if they're settled first. And like once that's established and product marketing is a bit more mature as a function, then you would bring in customer support or customer success. But one of the things that the book goes over is actually like the person you like, the stakeholder you need to establish a relationship with is whoever the most senior decision maker in your company is. So when you're in a startup, getting access to the founder is really easy. So like you should talk to the founder and you should be asking business level questions to them to understand, because you're overlooking so many teams, you need to see what they roll up into. And if you're just looking at marketing goals, you're not going to satisfy sales. But if you're looking at sales goals, you're not going to satisfy product. So you actually need to find the goal that all of them are rolling up into, and that is your business level goals. So if you can speak to your founder or your country manager, your managing director, CEO, if like you can get to them, go for it. Like try and get as close to them as you can, because they're going to essentially be the one who actually sees your work across all of those teams and is like, oh, like this is coming together now.
And what kind of conversation or buy-in do you need to get from that top level decision maker?
I think it can be sneakier than what people expect. Like you can just say to them, I would love to go get a coffee with you the next time we're in the office together. And it's a casual conversation and you're just asking questions and you're doing it from the perspective of I'm an employee and I want to be contributing to this business for my own performance, for the performance of the company, for my career prospects, for my promotion that I want to get or whatever. Anyone who has that as their motivation, like doesn't really need buy-in, because what leader would look at that and be like, no thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. You would hope that no one would reject that. And like when you're sitting down over coffee with that leader, are you trying to make sure that you're fully aligned on, okay, this is the direction that the company wants to go. This is the main products. These are the ideal customers. These are the stories that we want to tell, and just getting a good sense check with
Yeah.
them. That's what we need to be aligned on.
Yeah, if you can get as far as to revenue and specifically where that revenue is coming from. So there's like a very big strategic difference between we want to grow the company through net new business and we want to grow the company through expanding our existing customer base. So if you have the first one, focus on sales, focus on growth marketing, lead gen, working with those stakeholders. If your CEO has said our number one priority for the next 12 months is to grow our existing customers through land and expand, then go work with customer success. Like it will very greatly determine where you're spending your time and what your priorities are. And also, if you can clearly say, the work that I'm doing is directly contributing to this business priority, and that business priority is well known amongst the leaders, is like solidified in a document or in a manifesto or whatever, and you can point to it, then you can essentially just keep working uninterrupted. Because once again, who's going to say, oh, you're working on the business's number one priority? No, thank you.
Yeah, very clever. It's great advice generally for marketers out there to try and have those discussions and align themselves with business goals too. I mean, so often we even see marketers try and do work like identifying who their ideal customers are, and they do that just within their own department without speaking to leadership, speaking to sales, speaking to CS to find out from the business, who do they see as the ideal customers? What segments do they see as growing? Where do they really want to push into? And they end up, and I think it's something we're actually going to discuss a little bit later too, is why so many sort of like ICP or personas really just fall on deaf ears and not great. And I think a lot of that does come down to the fact that they're done in that silo without bringing in the other departments into that conversation. But before we get there, I still just want to keep defining this scope of what is product marketing, what isn't. What are some of the things that often try and get pushed on product marketers that you should really say no to and say, no, this isn't within our remit?
It's a tricky question, because that will really depend on what other skill sets you have in your team or in your business. So one of the kind of like debates on LinkedIn that I see all the time and that I kind of argue against is that like product marketers should not be making sales decks. Product marketers are not copywriters. Product marketers are, whatever. People want to put them in a box. And that really one depends on how mature your product marketing function is. Do you have 10 people? Are they specialized? Do you have one person and they're doing everything? Like that's two very different scenarios. And two, What kind of culture are you in? Are you in a business where it's very like stay in your lane, or are you in a business where it's like very flat hierarchy, everyone jumps in and helps each other? And product marketing is like across all these stakeholders. And if someone asks you for something and you are just constantly saying no, it's not a you're not a good team player in a way. I think there's a lot of product marketers who want to be the star of the show, but the star of the show is everybody winning. And so like pitching in where you're asked to is important.
Mm.
But it's also important to have boundaries. So you need to draw that line for yourself. Personally, some of the boundaries that I draw is like I will happily give input into what messaging, specific copywriting should be on a lead gen campaign, but I will not make that campaign. That is growth marketing to me. Like I'm not going to be in your Facebook ads account. So, that's a different skill set. Things like events, product marketers can sometimes be very heavily involved if you're doing a trade show where you're going to have live demos, if you're going to have a lot of like product information. But then if you're doing a roundtable, that's not really product marketing. So yeah, it's moving goalposts, to be honest, which can be a really frustrating answer. But a marketer's favorite answer is it depends.
And I think to your point, it's looking at who else is in the team, who else is in the business, and asking yourself who is best suited to do this. And if the answer is you, that like given who else is around, then you probably need to put your hand up and say, okay, at this point in time, I'm the right person for this. And if you're already at maximum capacity in terms of the amount of work that you're doing, then maybe that's a conversation about resourcing that people need to have as well.
Yeah. If you can again like link it back to the business priorities, then ask for the resourcing. If you say like this is directly related to this priority that we've all agreed we have and it needs to be done and I can't do it because I'm already prioritized accordingly, then yeah, either external resource or budget or whatever.
I want to get onto the great breakdown between sales and marketing. And with that often goes this black hole in a
Yeah.
communication, like feedback loop, because sales have so much great intelligence because they're on the front line and soaking up all that intel about what people are saying, what works, who's in market, who their current vendor is, all that kind of stuff. But there is often such a big breakdown between passing that information back to marketing, and that can be really helpful, like as a product marketer as well. Have you got any advice on how to keep those feedback loops stronger?
Yeah. So a lot of times feedback breaks down because either, you know, if you're from the perspective of a marketer asking a salesperson for feedback, they don't really know what it is that you want to hear. And then they kind of default to, oh, they probably don't want to hear this. And they self filter in a way that's like uninformed. So like they're not sure what to do, so they do nothing. Or they've given a lot of feedback in the past and they haven't seen that feedback eventuate into anything. And so it feels like wasted energy. Why bother giving feedback when it doesn't really go anywhere or do anything? So a feedback loop is really important and making sure that you close the loop. And by that, I mean, if you put out a piece of work and someone has had even a small input on it, when you announce the work, because marketing is also internal marketing. Like you always need to be telling the business what it is that you're doing, saying things like, thanks to feedback from the sales team, this specific thing has been updated, or thanks to a conversation with this person or a call recording that that person shared with me, like it led to these things. And people see the explicit chain of events between giving feedback and something happening. But also, going back to that first point about they don't know what feedback to give you calling out examples of feedback teaches the other salespeople, oh, that's what they're looking for. I actually have some of that. I can give that to them now that I know that they want it.
Mm. Yeah, calling it out is really, really important. And I think for anyone that's done sales themselves or has worked extremely closely with sales, you see how hectic their days are and how their days are structured and measured by activity and the amount of activity. And often, like for a lot of kind of SaaS companies too, the holy grail metric for a lot of them is like meetings booked and the number of meetings booked and the activities in behind that. And so they are go, 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 go all the time. And so stopping and pausing because marketing is asking for feedback, if there's not enough context in there, if you're not showing, hey, this is actually going to benefit you and make your life easier, and we're going to make you look good to the stakeholders in the business,
Yeah.
I now understand why they're like, marketing, just stay in your corner, just trying to stay alive here. Is that something that you've seen?
Yeah. I had this very long-winded job experience where through like a series of Chinese whispers, the sales team stopped talking to me. Basically, I was like super overworked at one point, and so the sales director had said to the sales team like, nobody interrupt Kayla. But then that had like trickled down into like, nobody's allowed to talk to Kayla because she's like too good for us. And so it took me like 6 months to reverse that. One of the things that I did was work one on one with the sales team to listen to their calls and just be like, oh, this prospect mentioned this topic. Did you know we have a blog about that? Did you know that we have a PDF? Did you know that we have a video? And they went from, we're not allowed to talk to Kayla because she's too busy, to, I don't want Kayla to listen to my calls because she's monitoring me, to, oh, actually, Kayla's really helpful. And if I ask her for things, she does them. And the suggestions that she makes are really helpful. And I didn't know that that existed. And I was actually struggling to think of an excuse to reach back out and start that conversation again because that person ghosted me. And Kayla's just giving me the perfect thing. So, like, relationships take time, and they take effort, and they take intention. And so, really thinking of that before you go and approach your sales team and start asking them for stuff or start complaining about them or saying that they don't do their jobs or whatever, like, it's good to take a step back and be like, hold on a second, what's actually going on here?
Yeah, walk a mile in their shoes as well. And I think that's a really good point about doing that sales enablement piece and offering them help one on one, because like as marketing we think about communication in terms of like one to one, one to few, one to many. I think the marketing sweet spot is often like that one to few, one to many, but that's not often what sales experience. Sales might have a better conversation with a prospect because of the few many comms that we're doing, but they're probably not directly seeing the impact of the feedback loop to marketing with having a better conversation, or it might take a while for that to click. So it sounds like that's great advice in terms of building that relationship faster, is helping them like with those one-on-one resources. Like this is some good material that if you want to follow up with a prospect and you don't want to just say, hey, just checking in, something that's value led to go back to them with.
Yeah, you've always got to have an offer. Like, this is what we say in marketing as well. So we need to take our own advice. It's like always have a good offer. And when you are reaching out to the sales team, you need to have a good offer for them because, as you said, they're busy, they're measured in activity. Slowing down for them to do an internal meeting is actually potentially taking away from their bonus or commission or paycheck. So they're very incentivized not to take that internal meeting.
Yeah, they are. And another thing that often leads to a bit of breakdown between marketing and sales, or maybe sales roll their eyes at, is whenever marketing ships its next persona or ICP,
Yeah,
right? And you wrote a good piece
that
on
was an excellent
Sassy
segue.
Sarah. Yeah, you wrote a good piece on Sassy Sarah. Do you want to tell us about Sassy
Yeah.
Sarah and why we need to avoid Sassy Sarah?
Yeah, I think this is very specific to B2B. So, any B2C listeners you might have, very sorry for offending Sassy Sarah, but we adopt these personas in marketing that are like, as you were kind of saying before, like one to one. They're trying to nail like a very specific person. And like, I've seen things so. I have a really bad poker face. And so when I think something's really dumb, I have a really hard time like hiding that. And the amount of time someone that gets come out because someone has told me what their personas are is just like so bad. So there was one client I had where they told me that their target audience was product managers, and then they were like really proud showing me their persona stuff, and we're like, product managers love rock climbing. And I was like,
Oh,
what are you going to do with that information? Like,
I literally just
how is
smacked my
that actually
microphone.
exactly right? Like, okay, are you gonna sponsor a rock climbing team? Are you gonna open a bouldering gym? Like, how does this translate into marketing activity? And the answer is it doesn't, which is why personas end up not being adopted, not being used. The sales team laugh at them and then they get revamped 12 months later because they weren't working. But in a B2B context, the ideal customer profile is much more tangible because it's only one. And typically it's done through a lot more data rather than, oh, like this person owns an SUV and has 3 kids and lives in the suburbs. That's useful for B2C if you're selling products and you have like physical retail stores and things like that. But in B2B, you're selling to companies and you need a profile of the company that you're selling to, not the individual buyer, because that buyer will move on. They will change jobs. They will, have the rest of their career, but hopefully that company stays as a customer. And how you determine your ideal customer profile can vary, but usually it is like who has the best profit margin, who has the lowest churn, what segments are most aligned to our long-term vision. Like, are we small and they're small, but we're going to grow together? Or are we going straight after enterprise? Like, what's the long-term play? And in B2B, and particularly in software, which is what I work in, your first year of contract with a customer might not be profitable. And so you really need to be thinking about, okay, yeah, this persona is great for targeting for lead generation because we get so many leads from them and they close and we're really happy about that. So we're just going to really hammer that segment. But 12 months in, they have a 90% churn rate. So you've actually made no profit off of them and it's been a loss. Whereas if you look at the customers who maybe you have a harder time getting leads from, but they stay with you for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and after the first year, it's just profit all the way. Like, which one is actually better for the business long term?
I think it's so important when you like people often when they do sort of like 80/20 analysis on their business to see what are the top drivers of growth for us. Too many do just look at like outright revenue and they're not looking at the
Yeah.
profitability. And looking at churn numbers can be a good indication, but also it can be really helpful, especially if you're servicing upper mid market and enterprise. You can have great revenue numbers, but you look at the time to service, cost to service, and you go, oh my God, we're actually not making any money on this deal at all. So I think you're right. You have to be so much more strategic about it. And I suppose B2C naturally reaches much larger audiences, which is why they aggregate them with more demographics, right? Which is like broader brushstrokes. Whereas B2B, by its own nature, should have a much smaller addressable market. And so you can get a lot more specific about who you're reaching, why. And also, B2B, we need to do that, right? Because the risk to the buyer is so much higher in B2B than it is in B2C. Like I like to say, if I decide to buy some double denim online and I go out in my double denim, worst my friends make fun of me. Like not a big deal. But you make a wrong purchasing decision for a piece of software and you switch from the incumbent that everyone's been kind of happy with and that goes wrong, then that's like it can be a career limiting move in a lot of places as well.
Yeah. The other thing is in B2B and particularly in the Australian market where we're more risk averse as
Mm.
buyers, one of the most common things is like, oh, do you have any other customers who look like us? And you're not going to turn around and be like, oh, yeah, Joe, the product manager, loves bouldering and you love bouldering too. They look just like you. So you're going to pull out government matches with government or enterprise matches with enterprise. So, like, you should be building everything around these buckets, not whether or not someone owns a car.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think once you really have and define who that ICP is, obviously a big question for the business as well is pricing. And that's something that you really specialize into, Kayla. And I know you've created a workshop around pricing too. Why did you decide to focus on pricing? Why is it so important?
Yeah, so I've done pricing as part of product marketing for the entirety of my product marketing career, but I really started focusing on it this year, mainly because people were coming to me and asking me to do pricing projects for them, and I didn't have the capacity to take them on as clients. But the more that I was talking to people, the more I was like, actually, you could do this yourself. You just need to be given the tools to do it. Because honestly, pricing is such a sensitive topic, and nobody will be able to put a dollar amount on a product better than the people who built it and are talking to the customers. So the pricing that I focus on is not as much around, oh, you should charge $5 or you should charge $7.50. It's on when you put your price in front of someone, how are you justifying the product is worth that price? The value proposition is worth that price. How are you justifying we're premium and we charge more than competitors, but you should still go with us, even though it costs more because you get all this other stuff? Or, what are the surrounding things around your price that's leading people to choose you? And it's more of a hands-on workshop now. It's gone through a couple of iterations, which has been a lot of fun to work on and see different business types come through and how they adapt it and use it for their own business. But yeah, the other thing is most of the time the advice around what dollar amount is, oh, we'll just keep increasing it until people say no. So, you can do that and then you can build all this other stuff around your pricing to make people say yes.
So is it then about deciding sort of where you sit in the market, or a business comes into your workshop, they basically tell you where they sit in the market relative to their competition, and you're helping make sure that they can own that space, justify that price, do what
Yeah.
they need to meet that band of pricing. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. So whatever price you've gone with, whether you are like really inexpensive or you're actually really premium and you're the top option in the market, like you choose that, right? You choose your position and you can own it. Owning it generally comes through your pricing positioning. So the workshop is really about the positioning and like how you're portraying your brand, your product, your price all together.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. Um, what kind of research? Is there any research that people need to do before coming into your workshop, or you get them to do in the workshop to help with this pricing strategy?
Yeah, so often people come in with their existing pricing, which is no longer working for them. So whether that is because they need to increase the price just through, it's been 2 years since the last time they increased it, whether they've just released a new product and now they've gone from one product to multi-product, which has changed the way that their pricing interacts, or, they've removed a product, they've blended two products together into one. There's all sorts of scenarios where you need to update your pricing, and so that's usually what brings people in. So having your draft pricing, like how you want it. There's also the visual element, right? Like, are you going to present your pricing in a table? What is that table going to include? So having those drafts and coming in is the best way to do it. And it's also really good because it is live in person workshop and it's very interactive. So people do display like, this is my website. This is what we have currently. This is what's not working about it. And you might actually find someone else in the room is like, oh, what you currently have will work for me. So that's great inspiration. And there's a lot of idea sharing, and having different companies sharing in the same room cross pollinates really nicely into having a more holistic example to pull from. And then I've also got my swipe file of examples of different styles of pricing and presenting pricing, and how you can pick and choose sort of like Lego blocks and build your own version of that.
I like that. It's really, really actionable. Sounds like a really practical workshop, which I think all workshops should be. Do you need to do any kind of competitor research when you're in the room or in advance to see
It
like what's the competition doing with their pricing? How are they presenting it?
Yeah, it depends. I actually had a client literally yesterday ask me to look into a competitor's pricing, and then it turns out that competitor does not have public pricing available. So sometimes that's not helpful because they don't have it. some companies want to go really hard on the comparisons between them and their competitors, and they're really overt about it. And that's fine, that's a choice that you make. And so understanding how you want to compare and what you want to highlight, and know if you're going to compare against a competitor that you need to know that competitor inside out. Because if a customer has just come off a demo with them and they demo with you and you say, oh, that competitor doesn't have this feature and that feature, and your prospect says, well, they just demoed those two things to me, it can be detrimental to you ultimately. So yeah, if you're going to do price comparisons or feature comparisons or anything like that, definitely do your research.
What is your stance on whether you should display pricing or not at all? Do you think pricing should always
I,
be displayed, or is it a it depends kind of question?
I think pricing should be at minimum indicated. So I think every website should have a pricing page. The pricing page does not necessarily need to have the price. And I consider the price and pricing to be two different things. So if you don't want to show the dollar amount, that's fine, but you need something that is indicating to people the ballpark that you're in. So are you premium? Are you going to cost a lot? Are you, boutique service, whatever offering, or are you off the shelf and, ready to go, all in one, affordable option? And that language that indicates these things is also like signaling to the market, where are you in the spectrum of pricing? So even if you're not putting the dollar amount, you do need to indicate broadly where you are, because then you're avoiding people getting shocked or questioning, why is it that cheap? That can also be a negative thing. But also
Mm.
like, oh, well, you don't seem that premium. Why are you charging so much?
And I suppose you don't want to waste sales' time as well. Like if you don't have any kind of indication of pricing, and if you're selling something that's premium, and you would attract a whole lot of leads or prospects that are like just can't afford you and are nowhere near what you charge, then that's kind of a big waste of everyone's time and resources, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm finding the pricing page on a lot of my clients' websites, it continues to climb most viewed page on their website. So a lot of people now, especially because more companies are putting their pricing on their pages, a lot of people just go straight to pricing, and it's a very quick qualification. Is this in my budget? Yes, no.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, which I think is important for us to remember as marketers as well, is at the end of the day, there probably is going to be a set budget too. And unless there's like a very strong business case to go beyond that, then people mostly do have to operate within their budget. There's not going to be as much discretion as people think, which I think is really important to define like what your pricing is, who that's targeted towards, and knowing that they can afford it as well. Now, before we started recording today, I was very disappointed to hear that you didn't actually listen to Taylor Swift's Life of a Showgirl. But you did
Did
write
not.
something interesting about what her launch strategy taught us about pricing. So, first of all, can you please publicly apologize to Taylor Swift? I'm sure she's a listener of the B2B
I'm sorry,
playbook. And
Miss
then
Swift, for not.
second of all, what
Yeah, so I was looking at her website in terms of like her merch and the way that she packaged the different albums, and she's very famous obviously for having many variations of her album and slight differences between them. And so I thought it was a really good case study in how brand and price interact, because she could charge whatever she wanted. Like the dollar amount doesn't matter. She will sell. So she doesn't have that as an issue. And so it was really interesting, especially picking out the language choices in the descriptions of the products that justify the price. And in fact, a lot of it was actually just lacking. Like there was no justification for the price. It was just, this is the price. And of course, she's got the fans who'll pay. So for her, that's easy. But for simple, down to earth people such as ourselves, the things that really stood out to me, the strategies that her and her team are using, is a lot of like time crunch. There's the 24-hour countdown for each variation, and it's only available for that 24 hours. So if you want it, you have to get it now. That really stops people from thinking too hard about it and just impulse buying, especially because that is a very low price point. So that was $4.99 for each day, was like a different variation, which came with like 2 different songs. And then, yeah, what stood out to me was that she has cassettes and vinyls as well, which are more expensive than the CD. But in reality, if you're going to have one of 3 music players, it's most likely that you will have access to something that can play a CD. So people who are buying the CD probably will listen to it. Maybe not. Maybe it's just for display. But the amount of vinyl and cassette that people are buying probably doesn't add up to the number of people that own a record player or a cassette player. So owning those, like buying those and owning them, is not for a functional reason. It's not to listen to the music. It is to status signal your alliance to her or your loyalty to her, or your fandom inclusion, and you're part of that community. And then the last one that I pulled out, which honestly I could do a whole podcast episode on just this because the website was full of stuff. The last one was, she had a box set from memory that included, the CD and your standard stuff, but also had a jumper. And the jumper was like, in the imagery, the thing at the forefront. Like, you're going to get this jumper and it's got this print on it and it's got all these little designs and whatever. And then there was like basically no information about what is the jumper made out of, where was it made, type of inks, things that if you went onto a clothing website, you would 100% find that information as like the core product description. But in Miss Swift's case, she didn't cover any of that. And it just went to like collectible. And so the product that you're buying in that instance, again, is not necessarily the function of wearing a jumper that's going to make you warm. It is owning something that will signal to other people who you are, what your personal values are, what your interests and hobbies are, what you see your own identity as. And it works as a way for people to identify each other essentially and be like, oh, we're from the same in group, or actually you're from a different group. I don't like you, or I might like you, or whatever it is. So it's, yeah, what you're buying is not actually the music, it's the association with that fandom.
How do you see status signaling coming into play in B2B, or is that strictly a B2C principle?
You see it everywhere. Like, are you using AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure? A lot of that is brand. Does your company use Lenovo laptops or Macs? Does your company have offsites at fancy locations? Do you have an in-house Christmas party, or do you go to the opera house? Like, there's so many, and a lot of that will actually come down to, oh, maybe the HR team personally prefer that, or maybe your IT director personally prefers that choice. And so it bleeds into the company. And so, yes, we are still selling to humans, but those humans need to justify their decisions to a business. So, yeah.
Mhm. So it comes down to still people like me who hold my values do things like that. So people like me, the CTO, we all buy this software. Everyone buys that software, so that's the software I'm going to buy. And I suppose you could probably go a step further as well and create experiences that make them feel special and elevated in their own status as well. Like, if you're trying to sell to executives in large organizations and you're trying to get their attention, holding a small round table might not do it, but putting on an event where they're driving fast cars around a track and have like a really, really nice lunch or something like that, that is signaling, hey, you are part of this elite group of people. And who doesn't want to be part of that?
Yeah, it's tricky though, because in signaling an in group, you will also signal an out group.
Hmm.
And you may not do that with intention, and you may not pick that out group specifically, but there will inevitably be people who say, well, I'm not part of that in group, and so I'm excluded. It's tricky. It's a tricky line to walk.
It is. And I think that's why people find it really difficult to define their ICPs and to get leadership to buy in on, okay, who are our ideal customers? Who are we including? And by virtue of including, who are we excluding? But I think it's one of the misconceptions there is just because you're positioned to serve one audience now, it doesn't mean that once you've exhausted that segment that you can't reposition yourself in the future as the organization grows. I mean, if you've done well enough to exhaust that segment, fantastic. That's worked really, really well. Now, before you fully exhaust it, you can start reinvesting some of those resources into the next one, building out whatever products, features you need to do to serve it, getting that marketing in front of them before you really need to rely on them for that next stage of growth. So it's more just like you have a whole piece of the pie and you're starting off with a small slice, and then you just keep taking slices and slices and slices until you eat more and more of the pizza. Thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about when it comes to product marketing or pricing? Just conscious we've gone for about 50 minutes or so already. I know you're fresh off your
Yeah.
return from Japan and Korea. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover?
I would just say that if anyone is interested in product marketing, it's a very high demand, low supply job at the moment in Australia, potentially in all of APAC. And you don't have to have any particular background to become a product marketer. You also can look at whatever job you are doing now. Like I was saying, if you don't have product marketing function, someone in your company is doing it. There's no way that it's not being done. Have a look at your job and identify which parts of your job are product marketing, and you can use that to build a resume to go for a product marketing job. Or have a look at what's lacking in your company and how you can transition your existing role into a product marketing role if you're interested in becoming a product marketer. It's very accessible, I want to say. Like the I speak to a lot of hiring managers who are looking for product marketers, and when you get down to like, okay, well, what does this candidate need to have? It's always soft skills. The thing that they're looking for is curiosity, research skills, stakeholder management, communication, ability to distill thoughts, ability to identify patterns. And that's anyone can do that. So yeah, don't feel like product marketing is not a potential career path for you if you are interested.
One final question that's a follow on from that
Yeah.
is, I mean, why do you love product marketing?
Kind of. So I was a generalist marketer, and I was like the only marketer in Australia for a company that was headquartered in the UK, and I was doing everything. And I just knew that that wasn't going to be a long-term career path for me. I kept a list of every task that I did for a week or 2 weeks or something like that. Then I started categorizing all of those tasks into I enjoy doing this, and this is not really like the fun part of my job. I don't want to be doing that. And then I took the things that I did enjoy and just started putting them into job searches as keywords to see what job titles were matching to those things. And it actually came up with both product marketing and customer engagement marketing or lifecycle marketing. And basically, the trend was I personally really liked going deep on customer relationships and following the customer from lead all the way through to customer success and renewal. Whereas the things that I didn't enjoy as much, which is the very fast paced world of lead generation and demand generation, was once you capture them as a lead, you pass them on and you're not as invested, or even people don't feed back to you like, oh, this cohort of leads ended up having a 10% churn rate or whatever. Like you don't get that long term development with them. So yeah, that could be for some people. I'm not saying that's bad, but it's just not for me.
No, I love it. I think it's good for people to hear what you love about it, because if they like those things too, then they might be more inclined to do what you've done and try and niche down in product marketing. Kayla, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you jumping on, especially fresh off your trip. If people want to learn more about you, your newsletter, the Medica Method, your book, where's the best place to direct them?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn. So just search me on LinkedIn. I'm luckily the only person in the world with my name, so I'm very easy to find. Or you can go to medica.com, and then from there I've got links to like everything that's relevant to me.
Beautiful. Thank you. We'll link it in the show notes and in the article that complements this episode too, just in case anyone has any issues finding it. Kayla, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.